Teachstone is the organization, the publishing company that actually puts out this tool. So this is one of those tools. Some people argue that it's a horrible thing. Some people argue it's a good thing. That you have to be a certified trainer to say you are trained in the tool. So that's always my disclaimer before we go over the class: is you are not trained to use the tool. All right, but by the end of today and the end of Thursday, you will be familiar with the tool, which is a huge thing. 99.9% of the people that are out there using the tool are not trained in the tool. So don't think you're at a disadvantage. You are actually at a very large advantage. If you go to a lot of your coworkers, most of them, if you go into the field, haven't even opened the class tool, and yet in the next couple of years they will be evaluated using it. So if you go on an interview, as long as you pay attention the next couple of days and do what you need to do to become familiar, it is a big advantage as far as being employable that we go over class in this course, okay? So, but I want you to be very careful when you do say that you're familiar with the class tool, that you don't say you are trained in the class tool, because it's very different. Eckers, you have been trained in scoring. Whether or not you still get it, technically you've been trained in scoring it, okay? We watched the videos, we went through it. Class, you will be familiar with the tool. Training the tool is about $5,000 to go through the training, and it is a 2-week process, okay? I'm not trained, okay? It's a lot of money and it's a lot of time that I don't have either of those fun things. I'd rather use it to go to Disneyland. But I can help you become familiar with the tool, okay? And I say all of this because we're going to be using their videos, and I'm going to be going back and forth between their website because I want to make sure that it is fairly represented and that you guys understand that I'm not a certified trainer. There's no instructor, by the way, in State Center Community College that is a certified trainer, so I'm not lagging in that department. There's very few trainers in Fresno County. It's just one of those things that's very difficult to do. All right, so that's my disclaimer. But again, going back to the fact that you're familiar with the tool after this class is huge. When you go to an interview, put that on your resume, right? The fact that you've spent 3 hours, more than 3 hours devoted to becoming familiar with this tool is a big thing, okay? Employers like to see that. In the next couple of years, every center is going to be accountable for being evaluated using the class tool. It's part of the QRIS quality rating improvement scale. Okay, so it's a big thing. It's why I choose to introduce it in CD20, because it gives you guys really a leg up on other people trying to get a job. Okay, given all of that, it is incredibly complex. If you thought Eckers was difficult, class is even more complex. Class is even more difficult to understand. Okay, so you're not going to be an expert. You might understand Eckers really good after 2 class sessions. When you walk out of here on Thursday, it's still going to be very confusing to you, and that's okay. Okay, but you will be familiar with the basic concept it's meant to cover. Does that kind of make sense? I know that's a big, long disclaimer, but I just want to make sure that you understand the differences in all these tools we're going to look at in the next couple of weeks. All right. I'm going to start it again.
One teacher who really changed our lives. And when we think about that teacher, what we think about is the relationship that they had with us, how they motivated us, how they pushed us.
One of these days I'm going to get technology to work for me the first time.
And it's really those teachers and those experiences that can be life-changing.
Interactions matter.
Interactions matter.
Interactions matter.
Interactions
Matter.
Interactions matter.
Interactions matter because they engage, because they draw children to their
That is.
resources.
Interactions matter because research shows that children who are in
We'll
more
start again.
supportive environments have better
All right, they've
improvements
got to
in
get the speaker
academic
fixed.
skills as well as social skills.
Is that buzzing? It's annoying, huh? Yeah. Is it?
We founded Teachstone to bridge the worlds of research and practice, to take those
All right, let's see if we can
tools, particularly
move it through there. All right. This is important, and a lot of this will probably be review to you because you know how important relationships are, and relationships are the foundation of interactions. You've had me for CD7, then we go over that extensively in every other class. You look at the emotional support, the emotional and, what is it? social, goodness gracious. Social and emotional support is the most important. Can children learn cognitively if there's no emotional and social support? No, remember that is the foundation of all learning, is that social and emotional support. So we're going to take a look at the research, and this is important because when you choose to use a tool for assessment, is it good to know that that tool is based on what the research says? Yes, looking at the research and knowing that the tool is based on research makes it what? What's the other word that we learned? It measures what it says it's going to measure. So this says it's going to measure environments based on the research. So that makes it what? It measures what it says it's going to measure. Valid, right. It makes it valid. So that's why we're taking a look at the research, because you need to know you are using a tool that is reliable and that is valid. Okay, is that important to know? Yes, because you're basing decisions on how you interact with young children, what emotional support you give them based off of this tool. That's why it's really important to understand, and why we don't just arbitrarily pick up any tool that we print off of Google when we're going to assess children. Does it make a difference? The quality of the tool? Very much so. So effective teacher-child interactions are an active and crucial ingredients for children's social and academic development. That's not new news to you, is it? Say, no, I'm an advanced student. Duh, I understand that. Children in ECE settings are not consistently exposed to effective child and teacher-child interactions. This is probably not new news to you. Do we have high-quality child care universally available to young children? No. Say our child care is pretty sucky in the United States, right? This is not new news to you also. Most children are not given a high-quality early ed experience. And a lot of it is because interactions are bad. I mean, it boils down to the interactions. To maximize the impact for children, quality improvements efforts need to focus explicitly, so solely, on teacher-child interactions. We focus on making sure that we have the best curriculum, that we have school readiness, that we have the best flashcards, that we have the best environment, and yet how much is focused on the interactions between the child and the teacher? This is typically the last thing that's addressed, and yet it is the most important thing that's addressed. So we find this fancy new curriculum, we buy all the cool things off of Community Playthings, and yet our center is still horrid. Why? Because the interactions are still horrible. It doesn't matter what else you have. If your interactions aren't good, then nothing else is important. Carefully designed and implemented professional development support can improve the quality of teacher-child interactions. So you need education. You can't just say, I'm just going to be better at managing 24 preschoolers and providing them emotional support. That is not how it works. We're not born understanding how to manage a room full of 12 to 24 preschoolers. This is why you have to have education. Is it hard? How many of you have been in a room with 12 to 24, 2 to 5-year-olds? Do you get a little frazzled? Do you get a little saying things you should not say? Do you get snappy? Are you perhaps not as emotionally and socially supportive as you should be? Yes, that's why we are educated on better ways to do it. It does not come naturally. Okay? This is a misnomer that we all of a sudden, because we're people that are in early education, we're automatically nice and kind and patient. It is not the truth. Okay? It takes education. But this is why it's not focused in on, because we think this is a personality trait. If you're nice and you're kind, then you're good to go. And that's not the truth. You need education on how to manage a group full of screaming, yelling at you children. So a couple of the very supportive early intervention studies that really gave us this data. One of the first one was the ABC Darien and the Perry Preschool Project and the Chicago Child Parent Centers. These also had a major component that focused on relationships and interactions. They involved the parents, they involved the community, they involved the teacher. So what we had after these very influential early intervention programs was the fact that it's not just the academics, it's not just the environment, but it's the relationships. Those of you that have taken CD30, what theory is this starting to sound a lot like? You're advanced students, you should remember this. How many of you have taken CD30? Like I've had half of you. So what theory is this? Bronfenbrenner's bioecological model. Oh yeah, right. Remember the little flowers that you had to do? Oh yeah, all right. It's all about relationships. It's all about social and emotional. You're not going to escape this. It's not just me that harps on this. This is universally what's important. And again, we have research that supports it. What we saw, though, after these children had these huge IQ gains, the children that were coming out of ABC Darien, Perry Preschool Project, and Chicago Child Parent Centers, was that they had these huge IQ gains. So we measured their IQs, and then in third grade, their IQs were back down from where they had started. And so this is a huge issue. We have the same thing that's happening with Head Start kiddos too. They have all of this wonderful, beautiful support, and they start kindergarten wonderfully. And then by the time they get to third grade, we have a fade-out effect. They are still better off, so I don't want to negate the importance of these programs. They are still better off because of their early ed experience. But because interactions become less important to teachers and researchers in kindergarten through third grade, we have a fade-out effect. Okay? Because that is not focused in on. So they got those great early relationships because they went to high-quality programs, but we saw this fade-out effect because it wasn't focused in on the K through third system. Okay? So this is why a lot of these tools are starting to make their way into the K through third system. The class tool has a measurement tool that is explicitly for kindergarten through third grade. Think about your teachers. How many of you had the opportunity to have a kindergarten teacher that was warm and loving and compassionate and kind? Probably about half of us did. And then the other ones, have you ever seen that kindergarten teacher? Get in line, sit down, stop doing that. Does it make it very fun for those kindergartners? No, they're very sad and they hate school. Have you ever seen them? They hate it, absolutely hate it. It's because it's a social, yes, they cry a whole lot. Why? Because the teacher's just flat out mean and not kind and not socially and emotionally supportive. Does that make a difference? Oh, that makes a difference. Am I going to sit there and try and learn my ABCs of 1, 2, 3s if the teacher's mean to me? No. That makes a huge difference. Okay, so that's one of the things that we saw. So we have to realize that this isn't just something in early education. It is very important in early education, but it is just as important in the K through third system as having a teacher that is emotionally and socially supportive. So that's when we saw this fade out. We began looking at the importance of the classroom interactions in the classroom environment. So the presence of this fade out effect, because these kids had high quality curriculum, high quality teaching strategies in the K through third, well, most of them, but what was missing was the focus on the social and emotional environment. So we came to start looking at the importance of that. We talked about ecological systems theory. This is another theory that focused in on the importance of relationships. Attachment theory is another thing. If you go back to your CD39 or CD38 days, was there a lot of information that you had to learn based on attachment and social and emotional development? Yes. Ainsworth and Bowlby and Pickler and all of the other researchers focused on attachment. It is the relationships that matter. So we have all of this research, all of that, to say we have research that shows us, is social and emotional environments important? Say yes. Yes, but more importantly, when we take those environments, we need to break them down and say, okay, so social and emotional environments are important, interactions are important. What does that actually mean? Does that mean that I'm just a teacher who is very kind and smiles a lot? Yes, that's one small, eensy-weensy part of it. What else does it mean? It means it's the parent-child interactions. Are those important to a child's social and emotional health? It is the child care environments, and it is the classroom environments. Okay. So the broad range of outcomes based on all of these environments, social and behavioral, cognitive and academic, self-regulation. So the social and emotional environments hits on just social and behavioral, that's all that it affects? No, what does it affect? Cognitive and academic and self-regulation. If we can't regulate our behavior as adults, does it make it a whole lot harder to be successful? If your boss tells you you need to improve and you storm off and walk out and quit, are you going to be very successful? No. That's self-regulation. If someone tells you that you need to step it up and you throw a tantrum and walk out the door, that's self-regulate. That's lack of self-regulation. And you're not successful if you can't self-regulate. This all starts in early childhood education. We all see children, or perhaps have children, where we tell them, put the toy down, and what do? They melt down. That's self-regulation. That's why 2-year-olds and 1-year-olds do it much more commonly than 4 and 5-year-olds. It's not a skill they've learned. So all of the research showed on a large scale that quality of child care was linked to child outcomes. Okay? So how they did was linked to the quality of care. Not just quantity, we talk about this a lot in CD30, not just the amount of hours that they're in child care, but the type of care and the quality. This was a shift from what research was saying before, that it was just the hours. As long as they're not in child care longer than 20 hours, they're okay. 19 hours, you're good. It doesn't matter what environment. As long as they're not in over 20 hours, then you're good to go. Do we know that to be truth now? Say no. It's not the amount of hours in child care, it is the quality of care. They can be in child care for 40 hours a week, and if it's a great child care, 50, 60 hours a week. And if it's a great child care, are they going to have social and emotional issues? No. If it's a good quality child care, it was a funny question. If it's a good quality child care, it doesn't matter the amount of hours that they're in. And this is kind of contrary to what our thinking is, right? It's the fact that we don't have quality child care. So quality is defined as teacher-child interactions. That is the hugest predictor of how a child will do, is the social and emotional, the interactions between the teacher and the child. All right, so what does the class observation tool measure? We talked about interactions, right? If you take it down to one word, it's interactions. So it's a structured observation measure. Can you just go do a bunch of anecdotal records and a bunch of running records and then go and use this tool? No, remember we talked about you have to be trained to use it. It is standardized and it's highly reliable. And because of that, there's certain ways you have to observe. You observe for a certain time frame. You observe a certain amount of times. It's a certain amount of minutes. And then you stop, record a certain amount of minutes. You stop and record. Highly, highly standardized. Observations. This is a standardized test as far as you give the kids the test and they fill out a Scantron. This is standardized based on the observer's criterion. Moved away from structural measures. So how many books are in the classroom? And these are the types of things that the Eckers measures. And it's good to measure how many books. If you have 1 book in your room or 20 books in your room, does it make a difference? Yes. But this tool measures something different. And so this is one of the reasons why it's good to use multiple measures. Because having that type of information is good, but we also need to have other types of information. So the class tool moved away from books. It moved away from the type of curriculum. It moved away from looking at lesson plans. Okay? It just measures interactions. How teachers use the time and materials to get the very most out of it. So it does measure the instructional support, but it doesn't measure the quality of the curriculum. It measures how the teacher goes about using the curriculum, structuring the curriculum. You can have the very best curriculum, but have you ever walked in a room and the teacher's got a foundation of project approach and there's a great documentation and yet the room is in chaos every single day because she cannot manage the classroom? Yes. If you can't manage the classroom, are the children going to learn anything? No, it's chaos every day. So the 3 domains that we're going to take a look at are research and theory-based. Okay? So again, you're going to hear me say it again and again and again. This is a research-based tool. There's a couple things that we're going to look at on Thursday that makes it slightly culturally biased. Okay? The tool was made and a lot of the research was done in Ohio, Iowa, somewhere in the Midwest. Okay, so there are a couple of measures that, and class acknowledges this, that are culturally biased. One of the things is the eye contact. Okay, and we'll take a look at that. And you'll notice it when you see it because you're going to have to evaluate it. All right, so pre-K to 3rd grade research. A supportive classroom environment can help at-risk students to thrive. 3rd grade students with poor attention skills make greater reading and math gains in emotionally supportive classrooms. So again, we know about this in early education. We harp on it, you hear it, and yet we don't see the focus in on the kindergarten through 3rd grade. So they did research, and you'll notice, do you notice that I like research? Yeah, it's a great way to understand what's actually going on. So what does this graph tell us? Gains and achievement in emotionally supportive classroom. So this is a 1st grade classroom. It's an emotionally supportive classroom. So this in the orange, these kiddos had no adjustment problems reported by the kindergarten teacher. So the kindergarten teacher said, they're good, no emotional problems. How do they do academically? So this is the gains in achievement. They're doing good, right? So these are low, not many adjustment problems, moderate adjustment problems, and this is high adjustment problems. So these kiddos right here have a ton of emotional problems that were reported by their kindergarten teacher. What do you notice happening in the blue line? Yeah, if you take a look at that high, meaning these are these are highly supportive emotional classrooms, right? This is a highly supportive emotional classroom. These are kiddos that in kindergarten had no emotional problems. These are kiddos that in kindergarten had large emotional problems. What's the difference in their achievement in math and reading between these two groups of kids? Minimal, right? So if we go down here, this is a low emotionally supportive classroom. So this classroom, this teacher is that teacher that says, get in your seat and sit down. Not nice, not kind, not emotionally supportive. Kiddos that don't have emotional problems, reported by the kindergarten teacher, how do they do? They survive, they do fine. Children that have a lot of emotional problems reported by their kindergarten teacher, how did they do? Horrible. Is there a big difference in achievement between these two? This is levels of achievement. Is there a big gap? Do you think this gap will be closed this year in this low emotionally supportive classroom? No. So what happens when they move on to second grade? Is that gap exist still? Yes. Is it going to get bigger? Yes. And what about third grade? Yes. It's going to get bigger. So by the time these kiddos are in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, are they very significantly behind their peers? The only difference is that they need some help socially and emotionally. That's it. No difference in IQs. They just need help socially and emotionally. Does this graph make sense? Because this is foundational. This is where we start understanding that in kindergarten, 3rd grade, it still makes a difference the quality of interactions. We forget that. Early childhood, by the way, is birth to 3rd grade. So what about 1st grade instructional support? So this is another measure. So the instructional support given in the low classrooms, the levels of maternal education, so why they choose to measure levels of maternal education is one of the things they link to later academic success is the levels of the maternal education. So how much education the mom has is unfortunately linked very closely to how successful children do. And they're unpacking all of the variables associated with that, but this is one of the tools they choose to measure. So low levels of maternal education, so low instructional supportive classroom, is there a big difference between kiddos that had high maternal education and low maternal education? Moderately supportive instructional classroom, is there less of a difference? What do you see right here? They pass them up. This doesn't happen ever in research. What is the only difference? What is the only difference? The level of instructional, emotional support that is being measured in this tool. And we're going to take a look at what exactly that measures. This is huge. Huge, huge, huge. We go from this, do you see this difference? This is academic achievement, to that. Does that make a difference for these kids? Is this life-altering for these kids? Does this determine a lot of the success they're going to have in high school in their later careers? Yeah. So do we see why it's important to measure these types of things and to get data and see, as a teacher, if I'm not giving very good emotional support, if I'm right here, does it have implications for young children? What are the implications? It's the difference between 101 and 104, which is a big difference when we're looking at academic achievement. Okay? So we go over these graphs because I really want you to have a grasp of how much of a difference measuring and understanding and applying this information makes. We don't just measure this because we're supposed to, because we're state mandated. We're measuring it like they talked about in the video so you can learn from it and you can do better. That's the only purpose. All right. So what are effective teaching and student outcomes in social and emotional range? So effective interactions are associated with more positive interactions with peers. They get along with one another better. They have more positive interactions. Better classroom engaged. If they're having higher social and emotional support, they're more engaged in the classroom. If a child is more engaged in the classroom, do they learn more versus staring off into space and not engaging? Yes, when you daydream, do you walk out of the class going, I have no idea what I learned today? Yes, you do that. I do it when I go to conferences. If you pay attention and engage yourself in the lecture, do you walk out going, I am so much smarter today than I was yesterday? Yes, sometimes. In my classrooms you do, maybe not economics. I always pick on economics. One of my best friends is an economics instructor. Yes, if you engage, you learn more. Say, correct, you do. I watch in your eyes if you do this. You're not engaged. If you smile and, this is really great stuff, you're engaged. All right. Fewer negative interactions with peers. When children engage negatively with peers, do they have a hard time making friends? If they have a hard time making friends, does that affect them? Yes. Yes. By the time they get to high school, if they have a hard time in high school and they have positive social and emotional, then high school's rough, but they survive. If they've never been able to make friends, and by the time they get to high school, does it have serious social and emotional implications? Yeah. Yes. If we take a look at all of the school shooters, this is what we see. This is huge, okay? This is a big, 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 big deal. Effective interactions are especially important, especially important for students who are bullied by peers. Knowing how to socially and emotionally protect yourself is a big deal. Okay, this is huge for young children. This is why we have anti-bullying campaigns. So they know socially and emotionally how to protect themselves. Anxious, withdrawn children experience less peer rejection in emotionally supportive classroom. Again, is peer rejection important? Does it affect their academic achievement? Very much so. We can't separate and say, they'll survive, they'll be fine, so their friends don't like them. As long as they do their math, they'll be good. It doesn't matter. Does it matter in kindergarten through third grade? Yes. They will not learn their math if nobody in the classroom likes them. This is how important socially and emotionally structured classrooms, how important it is. All right. So what are the dimensions? Again, we're going to learn some new terminology, and this is where it's going to be difficult because the terminology is different when we look at the ECHRs. The terminology is different when we look at the DRDP. So this will probably be one of the most difficult things when you start looking at different assessment tools is remembering what in the world they call everything. I get them confused. Okay, so my expectation is not that you memorize the terminology associated with it, but just be aware of the fact that there's different terms that mean different things for each tool that you use. Okay, it's just, how academia is. All right, so the dimensions that are measured in infants are relational climate, teacher sensitivity, facilitated exploration, and early language support. Those of you that have taken CD7, does this align with what we know is important in infant-toddler development? Say yes, it does. All right. If you haven't taken CD7, then you'll realize that. Toddler, positive climate and negative climate. So the emotional climate, that's set. They measure the positive and the negative. Regard for the child perspective, child guidance. What's happening in 2-year-olds? What are they developing? They learn to say no and mine, right? And as teachers, do we need to respect that? Yes. Can they tell us no? Yes. They don't like that. They have the right to say no. And do they have the right to say mine? Yes. It's understanding how to guide those behaviors into ways that are socially acceptable. Okay, so it's measured as it should be. Facilitation of learning and development, quality of feedback. So how the teacher responds when the child says no, how does the teacher respond to that? Does it make a difference? Does it make a difference if you say, you don't say that to me? Or, I understand that you don't want to do that. You still have to put your shoes on, but I like that you used your words to communicate with me. Is there a difference in what the child walks away with? Yes. You still have to do this, but you used words. Good for you. I understand what you're feeling. Good for you. Is it wrong that a toddler expresses themselves? No, they can be mad, they can be angry, they still have to do what they have to do, okay? But it makes a difference. And language modeling. What's happening in those infant toddler years? Do they learn language? Is the language the caregiver uses important? Yes. So we measure that. All right, in the pre-K years, positive climate, negative climate, teacher sensitivity, regard for student perspectives, productivity, instructional learning formats, concept development, quality of feedback, and language modeling. So we have more that we're starting to measure, okay, as the children go up. It's simplified over here. It doesn't mean it's any less important, but we're focusing in on the key emotional and social development points. So the kindergarten through third, positive climate, negative climate, teacher sensitivity, regard for student perspectives, behavior management, instructional learning formats, concept development, quality feedback, and language modeling. So K through third looks a whole lot like the pre-K measurements, right? And that's why we keep separating these kiddos that are in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, and yet emotionally and socially, they are very similar to our preschool children. This is one of the reasons why we fight and are continuing to fight for a K through third credential. Okay? So children going into liberal studies have to get a specific credential that qualifies them to teach kindergarten through third grade children. Right now you get a credential and you can either teach sixth grade or you can teach kindergarten. Is there a very big difference in those grades? Yes. And yet the training that goes into teachers for these different grades is exactly the same. So do you see why kindergarten through third look a whole lot more like preschoolers, socially and emotionally? They still need that same. And right now we're not acknowledging that. Hopefully sometime. All right, so open up the book because I want you to be able to see something while we go through some of these vocabulary words and distinguish the different things, okay? So the domains, what they call the domains, is one of the domains in the either classroom assessment scoring guide or the dimensions guideline is emotional support. Okay, so find the emotional support, whether it be in the big book or the small book, you'll be able to see emotional support. Okay, find it. Flip through it, open it up, look through, hands on. Should be somewhere there. So if you're in this one, emotional support, oh, this one is not okay. Look in the big one. If you have the small one, it's broken up a little bit different. On the book, on page 2. So if you have the book on page 2, in the dimensions guidelines, you're still okay because it's not the dimensions necessarily that we're going to look as, we're not going to look at that, but we're going to look, I'm sorry, not the domains, see, even vocabulary gets confusing to me. It's the dimensions that we're going to look at, okay, and I'm going to show you a picture in just a second. So the dimensions are found within the domains and focus on different aspects of the teacher-child interactions. So each domain has a bunch of different dimensions. Okay, it's kind of like if you've taken a look at the foundations book, the dimensions are similar to how you think of the foundations. So there's a bunch of different dimensions which in each domain. So an indicator, the relationship, positive effect, I think we're going to look at the example and then we'll go back because it's easier. All right. So this is basically what it looks like. Okay, if we break it up, these are what is going to be measured. So classroom interactions, and then the domain is emotional support, classroom organization, and instructional support. So within classroom interactions, we're going to be separated into the different domains. Then within each of those domains is a dimension. So do we see how, first of all, this is incredibly complicated, and that you cannot just pick up the book and the scoring guide and walk into a classroom and say, I got this. This is a very difficult tool to use. It is not very teacher-friendly in that you can just pick it up and use it, okay? So if we're looking at the cons of it, you can't just pick it up. But because it is so intense, and the training is so intense, we have a lot of reliability in the tool. So it's a trade-off. We get more reliable with more intense the tool is. We get more reliable and we get more valid. If we're taking a look at social and emotional support, what do you think is going to give us more information? Something that a whole book is used to measure, or a 10-item checklist? The whole book, right? A 10-item checklist might give you information, but are you assured that it's necessarily valid or even reliable? No. So we have a trade-off, okay? It gives you great information, but it's a very intense tool. So this is, within each of these classroom interactions, and now I'm going to forget them. Classroom interactions, what's the other two? Shoot. It's going to come to me. It'll come to me soon. Well, it'll come to me probably the next screen. What I don't want you to worry about is memorizing all of these different parts of it. Okay, the purpose of looking at this is so that you can see all of the little teeny weeny details that are measured in this tool. This is just one branch. So classroom interactions is broken up into 3 different layers: emotional support, classroom organization, and classroom interactions is broken up into 3 different domains, which is then broken up into all of those different dimensions. There you go. All right. Okay, so we're going to do that. I'm trying to think if I want to. All right. We'll save this. I'll let you guys process information, and then we'll just do our in-class activity on Thursday. So Thursday, if you did by